Welcome to Power Up Your Practice, the go-to podcast for law firm owners and managing attorneys working on the business, not in it. I'm Ruby Powers, your guide into the heart of law practice management, bringing your insights from leading legal minds, trailblazing attorneys, and expert guests who provide practical perspectives on running your firm more effectively and efficiently. And before we dive in, I'm thrilled to announce that my latest book, Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with actionable advice for growing a successful law firm. Be sure to grab your copy today. And don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive tips and resources. And if you're enjoying this podcast, we love your reviews. They help us reach more attorneys like you who are striving to build the practice of their dreams. Prepare to open your mind, be inspired, and power up your practice to the next level. Welcome, everybody, to Power Up Your Practice. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and excited to be here with Brittany Hernandez. We have met at some tech conferences out and about in the past, and really excited to have her. She's head of legal innovation at Gavel. She's a legal tech educator and international speaker. She's quite interesting reading her bio, and we'll get more into that. But I'm excited to have you, Brittany. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so cool to get to actually hang out with you a little bit more.
Yeah, I know. Like a lot of times we're just like at things and it's like hustle and bustle. And you don't really get to, that's what I really love about podcasts. You just really get to like have a good one-on-one. It's like having coffee and just like the whole world just disappears and you can really get to know each other better.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree.
So you have an interesting background, but why don't you tell us a little bit about your journey from law practice to legal tech leadership and what you're up to today with Gavel?
Yeah, absolutely. So my journey kind of starts a little bit before law school. I was in the military. I used the GI Bill to pay for law school. And then after law school, I actually graduated in 2020. I took the February 2020 bar exam before COVID hit. Yeah. So thankfully I was able to pass on the first try so that I was able to get my license in May. And then I actually had the plan already to get a master's degree after law school. So I took a kind of interim incubator course where I was able to be introduced to legal technology. There were a lot of different leaders in the field who put on a free course called Passport to Practice. And then a law school out of Germany also did one on legal tech essentials. So I was able to take all of these different courses and really learn about all the different tools that are out there and how lawyers were using them. So I got really interested in legal technology after I graduated from law school. And then I was already in the master's program. So I lived abroad for a few years. I got the master's degree in international film business since I was focused on more intellectual property and entertainment law matters. And then I did my dissertation on how we can use legal technology in order to facilitate legal services for people who generally can't afford them. Specifically, in my case, it was around film students and early career filmmakers and how we can use our tech savvy, our legal savvy, and our business savvy to provide solutions to that particular demographic and how we can think about structuring a business model that gives them access to lawyers when they don't really have a budget for it. So that was my my dissertation for that master's program, which later got me a job in a legal tech company based out of Scotland. And then after that, I was invited to work with Gavel. And originally I was doing more specifically law school presentations. And now I get to kind of open it up to everyone and teach other lawyers how to use technology in their practice.
Wow, so many things you just said. I want to ask so many other questions, like what countries have you lived in and access to justice, but it like in a whole nother setting that I hadn't thought about. Wow.
It's been an adventure. I lived in the UK for almost 4 years. I met my fiance there, which is very exciting, but I also just got to really love the people. I got to go to Estonia. I've done conferences in Mexico. I've been to France for conferences. I actually lived in New Zealand a long time ago, so I've lived in other countries and been able to travel a bit. But I think that, we're all actually the same everywhere. Lawyers encounter a lot of the same types of problems. So it's been really interesting to see that context in different countries and how we can create solutions that will provide, the means of addressing each of these pain points in different countries with a single tool.
Wow. Yeah, that is I realized that too when I was in a course with business owners in a small business course. Goldman Sachs 10,000 businesses, I realize a lot of business owners are having the same issues
Right.
regardless wherever they are. And I thought, oh, lawyers were so special or something like no.
No, it's so true. And you mentioned about like business owners. I think one of the things that we don't really think about or learn in law school is that you are a business owner as, a law firm is a business. And if you have a sole practice or a small practice and you're the leader of that, you are running a business. And so that's why, these podcasts are so important about how to power up your practice and how to think about your practice as a business and what tools do you need to facilitate that.
What were some of the like your findings or solutions on how to leverage technology for the access to justice or to from your thesis?
Yeah. So from specifically my dissertation, I came up with a design and business model for an app that would allow film students and early career filmmakers to earn points by taking market research surveys from different advertisers that want to talk to that particular target audience. And they would use those points to pay for time with a lawyer or checklists or templates. And so that idea of how can we leverage what each person in the chain needs at the different times. So for example, businesses might value information while lawyers might value money, while students might value templates and time with a lawyer and education or advice. So how can we shift these things around and leverage them in an environment that allows for each person to get exactly what they need? There was that negotiation exercise in law school about it was like a fruit that has a peel and somebody needs the peel and the other person needs the fruit. And so how do you kind of find that and get to that point? So that's how I was thinking about this particular app is, the lawyer needs the peel and the student needs the fruit and the advertiser needs the tree. So each person has something different that they need. But we've also seen this there's a company called HJ Tech. They were able to create, using our tool, Gavel, for example, to build a letter generator during COVID that allowed tenants to apply for eviction relief. So if they were getting, if they were in danger of being evicted, they were able to produce this letter using this particular tool that was built, and they were able to serve over 40,000 tenants in just 2 months. So it was really exciting to see that you're able to put something out very quickly that has a real world impact, and you're able to scale that with a very small cost. So because your actual cost for the tool itself is very low, and the time that it takes to actually build these types of workflows or questionnaires or letter generators is very low, you're able to actually affect a lot more people and reduce the price, either make things free if you're having a lead generator tool, for example, or in this case, you're specifically trying to address access to justice issues, or you're able to offer your different products or tools or services at a lower rate, but serve more people. So you're not actually missing out on the revenue from that.
Wow, that's really awesome. All right. Yeah. It just gave me an idea about something, but I wanted you to explain a little bit more what Gavel is, and for those who might not know, and explain
absolutely.
That.
So Gavel is a document automation solution for lawyers that allows you to take your legal templates and turn them into what you're interfacing with would be a question and answer session that you design and create and add the different questions as well as all of the logic that's attached to those questions. So what that means is, for example, you're able to really have control over what is output at the end of this questionnaire. So which documents are generated, and within those documents, what clauses, what pages, what letters, what numbers, what calculations, or whatever else needs to go into that document. So it allows you to take, let's say, 10 different templates that you would normally spend 3 hours preparing, and instead turn that into an automated questionnaire where you can push information from a client intake form or from other data centers. For example, if you use legal practice management tools like Clio or Decision Vault or Leadly, for example, or any other tool that would be on Zapier or Make, and push that information into all of these different documents, generate them all at once, and have those conditions that you've set around each of these different pieces.
What percentage of firms do you think use a document automation tool?
That's a good question. I think there's a higher percentage than you might think now. So not specifically document automation, but I do remember a statistic that came out last year from Clio's Legal Trends report that said 79% of law firms, or at least solo and small firms that were surveyed, are at least trying these different tools, not specifically document automation, but trying legal technology and AI and trying these different tools out in their practice. So thankfully, I think that's been a huge increase over 2023, for example. So I think people are getting more and more comfortable with the idea of using different solutions, and they're more willing to test and try them, even if they don't end up implementing or adopting them, wholeheartedly. They're at least giving them a try.
Because the alternative is a lot of like copying and pasting and using. So why shouldn't people do that?
So yeah, good question. So that's what I used to do when I first started practicing. I had my template, and then I would duplicate that template and then, change the name and find and replace.
We're all guilty of it.
We're all guilty of this. And that's okay. That's completely fine. But I think if you think about how precious your time is, how expensive your education was to put you in a position where you could actually practice at the top of your license versus spending time on this kind of menial task of finding and replacing, or even wasting your paralegals time doing that if you're having them do the first round, and then you still have to go through and look for all the different errors. And maybe you have, even in like find and replace, for example, what if you have different formatting for the name throughout the document? Now you have to try to go back and try to find all the different places where the whole name needs to be an uppercase, or all of those different pieces. So what you can do instead is reduce all of that wasted time by using these types of document automation tools, so that you can set those rules in advance and say, the decedent's full name goes here, it's in uppercase, and I need that to appear in these 10 places in this particular document, and these 100 places in another document. And then I need you to always show this clause if the person is married. And I need you to add the spouse's information and the children's information in this table if those conditions are met. So I feel like we're able to take all of the rules that we run through anyway and just automate that process so that we have error-free documents that populate every single time.
And so you can take like a government form and create like a questionnaire so that that information gets
populates every time.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So we do have something right now where we're starting to build out the forms that are standard for everybody. So if there are a lot of forms in a jurisdiction that everyone must use, then we are actually paying to have a Gavel expert build those out for people, so that we don't have all of these individual lawyers building out the same forms. We've built it, and you can just use that one. Okay. So that way you're able to just enter your information. You have that information then stored in your account that you can reuse in the future and push into other documents as needed. But that one that you all have to use in that particular jurisdiction and practice area is already built out. So we do have a way for people to request what they want to have built next. So we already have some in California, Colorado, Florida, Minnesota, New Jersey, Vermont, and a couple of other ones as well.
And how long has Gavel been around?
Yeah, so Dorna Moini started the company back in 2017. So it started out a little bit differently than what it looks like today. She actually started with the idea of a consumer-facing product. So she was working at Sidley Austin as a lawyer, and saw, when she was doing some pro bono work, the opportunity to reduce all of the manual work and data entry that she was doing during that time. She wanted to spend more of her time actually representing her client. So she had the idea to engage a computer engineer to help her build out this particular system that would allow for this reducing all of the different errors and data entry. And it turned into what was called Help Self Legal, which allowed survivors of domestic violence to obtain restraining orders. So they were able to fill out this information for a reduced fee, and then it would populate the documents, and they were able to print them out themselves, file them as needed. So that turned into other lawyers taking a look at that and saying, how can I do that for my practice? And then the company pivoted to, at the time, change to Documate, and we just recently rebranded to Gavel in the past year and a half or so.
That's a great origin story for the company. I think a lot of times we're, leverage technology, use AI, leverage
Right.
technology, but like knowing exactly how these particular ways to do so, you're like, whoa, this can really save a lot of time, especially if you don't have a system like this. And
Right.
I bet there's probably reports of just how many hours that can be saved, and not just the attorney time, but your assistant administrative time. And also,
Yeah.
like, clients don't like filling out the same questionnaire multiple times. Like, they want to just
Right.
once, and then like, I get so annoyed when I go to a doctor, or even with my kids old school, and they'd ask me the same darn questions on like 10
All the
different.
time. Yeah,
Yeah. Can
exactly.
you go help them? Because like
Yeah.
that is
Exactly. That's actually exactly what I think as well. I recently went to the doctor and I had to fill out all of this information. I was like, please don't ever ask me this again. But then you get there and they have a piece of paper printed out and they say, can you write this all again? So then you have that, all of that wasted time of me filling out this information, then getting there, having to write it on a piece of paper. Then someone has to take that paper and type it in manually to somewhere else. So it's, how do we think about reducing all of that wasted time that everybody's at these different touch points actually, having wasted, going through all of these different steps. So I think you have it exactly right, is how can we think about not only saving our own time and our paralegal's time and our law clerk's time, but how can we save our clients' time, and what can we do that really maximizes and optimizes their experience with working with us?
What are some of the different ways people are using Gavel? Are there like type of
Yeah.
document automation, like just examples?
Yeah.
Because I think that helps spark people's mind.
Yeah, I think it does help to have some
Yeah,
examples. Yeah. I
yeah.
think there's like kind of that point that jump we have to make from like what's hypothetically possible and then go into the practical. So our top practice areas that generally like to use us are estate planning, family law, immigration, corporate, bankruptcy, and so on. So these different ones are very transactional based or template based practices. So they're constantly using documents over and over again. And there's just tweaks that they need to make throughout each of these documents. So for example, an estate planning attorney who needs to prepare an estate plan for a client, which includes lots of different documents, powers of attorney, they need to have their HIPAA authorizations, they need to have their trusts and their wills and all of these other documents that are included into this particular estate plan. They can actually generate all of these documents at once from the beginning. Let's say, for example, you have your client intake that's on Gavel or in some other system. You take all that information and anything that would be relevant in those documents gets pushed over into all of this kind of estate planning documents. You go through and say which documents you want to populate for that particular session. So you go through and you say, I want to prepare to write now a trust, a power of attorney, and a will for this particular person or client. And then you run through and answer any other questions that aren't already from the client intake form that would prepare those documents. And then it will generate and populate all of those at once. So that would be a really good example, for example, of an estate planning example. And then we also have, like you said, all of the kind of standard forms that would be required in a family law case. So for example, if somebody is initiating a petition for a divorce, what all their documents would be needed there, things around guardianships, any types of documents that you would need to prepare in order to carry out whatever you've been engaged to do for the client.
Wow, that's while we were talking, I was on a call last night because I'm an immigration attorney, and we were talking a lot about how a lot of immigrants are wanting these guardianship, power of attorney documents for their families and their situation. And that's not normally my area of expertise, like for authorization agreement for voluntary adult caregiver,
Right.
durable POA, financial activities and childcare, and medical power of attorney. And I was just like, well, wait, if we could just do like a questionnaire, probably with Gavel, and then like, boom, this could be a lot more efficient, because we're considering doing like these mass little workshops or something like that, so that people can have these documents just as a precautionary measure. But
That's really smart. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I'm always trying to see like you. So that's why I like that story you shared about your dissertation
Mm-hmm.
of like how to leverage, how to use technology to access to justice and
Mm-hmm.
sort of meet the needs for people that normally are not met. And,
Yeah.
even just the origin story of Gavel, that's awesome. And I think also when you think about leveraging technology, you think about like, well, you could pass on the savings to your client. And there's just so many ways where I think us as lawyers think that we have to be like, I guess that soup to nuts, like the A to Z. And
Yeah.
really people are just with like sometimes limited scope
Right.
services, and or just how can we make it more bite-sized and more approachable for the different clientele that have these needs.
Yeah, 100%. I think that makes a lot of sense. I think there's a lot of people who, now that they have used technology and understand that you can take something that would normally take 3 hours and you can do it in 3 minutes, are understanding that you really have to think about different billing models as well, and how we can package our services in a way that makes sense for not only for our client, but also for us. I think there's a need for a lot of price certainty going into that type of relationship. I know when I was looking at, I told you that I met my fiance in England, and so when we were looking at immigration attorneys, and the price tags on them were actually, at least it was something that I could look at and say, I can
Mhm.
afford this or I can't afford this right now. And so there seemed to be a lot more of that packaging of, this is going to be, at the time I was looking at something where it was going to be £9,000 in the UK dollars. But just the idea that I can look at that and I can say, this is something in my budget or it's not, versus thinking that you're going into a traditional billing model situation, hourly billing model situation, where you're saying, I'm essentially writing a blank check, not knowing at the end how much it will cost, which I think makes it harder to plan financially for adopting legal services. I've also personally engaged in one where you do a flat fee for a membership, as well as a monthly subscription for $75 a month for the maintenance of your LLCs, for example. So I think there's a lot of different billing models that people can use now with the incorporation of these different tools, where you won't see a dip in your revenue, and actually you probably see an increase in your revenue.
Yeah, I think that's this long standing conversation about like the death of the billable
Yeah.
hour, and just going more into flat if possible, and then
Mm-hmm.
also subscription model as well, and just like how tools like this help you sort of wrap your head around how that could be possible, with knowing how much time it takes, and sort of like what the value of the product or the service that you're presenting to a client.
Right. And there are actually even legal tech tools that help you to scope your work from hourly to flat fee. I know we've worked with alt fee before, and they have a solution that allows you to kind of go through and help you understand the different considerations that would make something be a certain price. So based on your hourly model and these different factors and what's included in the representation, this is likely what you should charge. So if people are having a little bit of a hard time transitioning out of the billable hour, that might be one way to start scoping your work, to understand how you should consider what the factors should be, how urgent is the matter, how many different team members is it taking to, how many different people are involved in this representation, how complex is it, all of these different factors that would increase or decrease the value, you could say, of the service.
Um, actually, Alt Fee was one of the startup competitions in ABA Tech
Oh, no
Show.
way.
Yeah, not too long
Oh,
ago, and we were talking to them with part of an ALA committee I was on.
oh,
But
awesome.
yeah, a lot of immigration law firms do flat fee just generally,
Right,
but
nice.
I think that's where a lot of things are going, in just flat or potentially subscription. But I think what I'm okay. I'll just say this: like
Yeah,
I do in my litigation side. I've been charging hourly for about 8 years already. Wow,
yeah.
wow. And
It goes by
in
fast.
7 years, I moved over to hourly 7 years ago
Okay.
because it was just this undetermined amount. I didn't
Yeah.
know how long it was going to take, and like there's some court cases I've had for since 2012, I'm just like,
Right.
what,
Yeah.
but I'm really trying to get back to flat fee actually. And like
Mhm.
another friend colleague who's been on the podcast, Bo Atkins, does family law in Canada, and he charges flat.
Yeah.
And so anyway, this is part of like that journey of like finding out how can we be more efficient, and how can
Mhm.
we pass that on, and how can we have that price certainty, like you were saying,
Yeah.
because a lot of clients don't like that, the unknown of that hourly. They want to have like a cap or just a
Yeah.
range and like all of that. And it really can depend on so many different factors.
Yeah, absolutely. And you would think that you would want certainty as well and how much you're going to bring in the month. So the realization rates would probably be higher as well if it's not a surprise. The ability to also break payments up, for example, if you want to have, somebody can break a payment up into 4 different parts and then it's just on auto pay. That was the other thing too about, why is it important to transition to these different tools, is that clients' expectations have changed. We're in a time now where people are used to logging into a client portal, having a way for them to pay online, for them to sign online, for their information to only be entered once. And then they're expecting you to be able to reuse that and not ask them the same questions again. Having a single place where they can log in and answer any questions. So all of these different pieces are things that we need to be thinking about as lawyers for how can we meet the expectations and exceed them or optimize that process for our clients.
Yeah, that's all is part of this journey. And I think the other thing I'm looking at is like the sooner we can be more efficient, the sooner we can leverage all of these programs, the more competitive we can stay in this space. Because I
Yeah.
think those who are doing this and implementing and doing the pains of building it into their, revamping their systems, like I feel like we've been doing that a lot this last year and a half.
Yeah.
I just wanted to be done.
Yeah.
It just builds into like the next phase, and then it just
Yeah.
like a ripple effect. But then you're ready to just expand when uncertainty or crazy, new a flux of influx of business comes, and you can
Yeah.
roll
Absolutely.
with the punches. So
Yeah. And I think it's especially important for solo and small firms because I think, you don't have the manpower to accept a lot of clients. But if you're able to build your systems in such a way that do accommodate for large volume, then you aren't missing out on a market that is potentially there for you, or all the different referrals that you might be receiving, because you have a system in place that allows you to be extremely efficient.
yeah. And so like if you were like those true solos, or the ones that
Yeah.
maybe they have like an assistant, or there's maybe 1 or 2 attorneys or something, like if we were talking to them and say like how to get them over the hump of like implementing a program like this, what would you say would be like some of the first steps to doing that?
Yeah, so I think that there are probably 3. The first would be to just come to one of my webinars, because I can actually show you what the tool looks like and it will reduce the fear barrier. I'm doing a couple of workshops and webinars in the coming weeks. So just look out for that and follow me on LinkedIn to see what's coming up next, because I think just seeing the product and seeing the tools and seeing how it's used and understanding how it works and seeing the price ranges and things like that will help with reducing the fear. I think another piece would be to use the ones that are already built out. For example, I mentioned the ones that are in different jurisdictions for different practice areas. So use workflows that are available to you so you can see how it works, produce your documents and just start using it right away. And then I think the third piece would probably be around I think maybe just like engaging with the idea of starting to build yourself, start a free trial and use the tool, get your hands on the tool, and actually, in this time period of a 7-day free trial, for example, you're allowed to make mistakes. And if you don't like it at the end, you just cancel and you're good to go. So I think there's a very low barrier to entry if you just think about making sure that you're looking out for opportunities to be educated in the different tools that you're interested in, or the different kind of areas of tools that you're interested in. And then also using something that's already pre-built, and then just getting your hands on the tool and doing free trials. I'm pretty sure there are a large percentage of tools like this that have free trials that allow you to have that space to play and try. One I would add is you could always engage a Gavel expert or a consultant, somebody that can help you to walk you through doing an audit, for example, of the tools that you're already using. What are some things that you could get rid of and reduce your subscription load? And then how could you streamline and connect everything together that's left?
So if that's all really good advice. And if you were to be like, where should I even start? Like you're like maybe overwhelmed by this whole thing. Like what, but basically like what forms or documents do you're most used? Like that would probably be a good place to go.
That's exactly what I would say. Yes, you have it right. So I would say start with client intake and your engagement agreement, because starting with your client intake as whether you have that be client facing or just something that you, when you're on the phone with your client and you're typing in the information, because that's capturing all of the information that you're going to reuse over and over and that you don't want to manually retype or have your client retype over again. So that's a really good starting point, is client intake. And then from there, your limited scope engagement agreement or otherwise engagement agreement, because that can be automatically sent through DocuSign. It's very easy to generally automate that, because you're just putting in very simple different pieces of information. And then from there, your other most used document, whether for you, I'm not sure what that would be for you, Ruby, but for other people that might be a power of attorney, it might be wills, it might be trust, it might be whatever other major documents are used by most clients.
Yeah, we have like a lot of cover letters and motions and those types of things, but we also have like immigration forms as well. So
exactly.
That's a whole nother thing.
Yeah. So just considering what you use the most and what would be a really good starting point, I would say start with client intake and follow the flow of how you normally interact with clients. What happens after you meet with them and intake their information? You generally engage them as a client if they're a good client and good qualification for you, and then go on from there.
Well, I mean, I think you've convinced me that, everyone needs to be more efficient and find some way to leverage a document automation tool of some sort in the firm. And it's almost like, I think it'd be a no-no to not be doing it,
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned earlier, it's just about being competitive in an environment, in a market, an industry where other people are using these tools and you're not. I feel like you will fall far behind.
Yeah, and then you can increase not only efficiency but accuracy, because you're not creating like having the data enter, and there could be a typo, or you're just asking the client to do it multiple times. When I think about a lot of the things that are out there in the efficiency space, like I was seeing a lot of those self checkouts. This was like 4 or 5 years ago during the pandemic when I was traveling. It was like, what's the self checkout for a law firm? And because like a lot, or even like when you're at a restaurant, you had to scan the QR code to order, even though you're physically there and stuff like that.
Yeah, you're not you're not having to wait for a waiter to come to you or notice you.
Yeah. But I think like having these questionnaires or forms and being able to more properly use the information from your client, and they can, answer those questions, and that can help populate the forms and the documents. I think that's what I've come to my conclusion was their self-checkout in a way.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, but having to have it, but having it set up is part of what you have to do in your firm to leverage that. So
there's just a tiny bit of upfront work, and then you're able to
use it. And then you can reap the benefits of it.
Exactly.
Well, you have like this really interesting background with you said you were in the military, you were in the Coast Guard in Puerto Rico and Alaska. Can you tell us like a little bit about that, and just like what are some of the things you've learned from that you still are using in your professional life?
That's a great question. So so I joined the military in order to pay for law school. I was in the Coast Guard for 4 years. As you mentioned, I lived and worked in Puerto Rico first, and then Alaska, which was such a big difference and change. But I think that one of the most important lessons, there's probably 2 takeaways that I would say. The first is you actually don't get along with everyone, and you have to learn how to be a professional, even if you don't get along with someone, which was a surprise to me because I've always been generally well liked. And so when I got into the military, and my personality was really a mismatch for a lot of the people that I was around, because I was very strict, even though I originally had applied to be an officer and did different interviews and scored well. they usually like to see you apply multiple times. And I just was going to, get the GI Bill and then get out. So it wasn't as important for me to be an officer as it was for me to just be in the military in general. So I ended up being enlisted, and but I had kind of an officer mentality and approach to everything, being like, I'm a perfectionist and very OCD about certain things. And there was a little bit of a mismatch of, maybe you should wear your bulletproof vest when we go out on these search and rescue and law enforcement missions instead of having it half hanging off. And so being that person who would correct and made me a little less popular than I would like. So I think one of the things that I learned in my professional life is that there may be personalities that mismatch, but that doesn't mean that you are allowed to be unkind or unprofessional. And it doesn't mean that you'll be less effective because you're professional. And then I think the other one is that having experiences like that, being in the military and traveling and living in different places, allows you to relate to more people in a way. So it's kind of like the opposite of what I just said, is that because I had more exposure to these experiences, now when I go out into the world, I'm able to understand different personality types because I've had exposure to more types of personalities in different contexts and in different countries.
No, I agree. Like I've lived in like 6 countries, and
Wow.
I've always thought like every US president should have lived at least 1 year abroad.
Yes.
Just so that they like get that exposure of just like how things are. It really helps you have a paradigm shift of how the world works and how we can't assume anything, and people can, like, there was a lot of times where I'd be upset when I got to a country and I'd be like, why did you do that? And then like we're like 5 to 6 months, I'll be like, oh, I get why.
You kind of understand it.
Yeah. And so then I was like, okay, now I don't hate that anymore.
Yeah. And, one of the things that I noticed when I lived abroad too, is that I had a car, ever since I was 15 and a half, and I was driving everywhere. Even though I was only driving for going a mile, I would drive in the US. So you're just constantly in your car. And then the day that I flew out to go to London, I sold my car, and then I didn't have a car for 3.5 years, almost 4 years. And I was taking the tube and walking, and if a friend had a car and you needed to go somewhere. So it was a completely different lifestyle. Like you said, you kind of learn to adapt. And so that characteristic or skill or trait can be developed by living abroad. So, or just having different experiences with different people outside of your very small unit.
Yeah, and I think it parlays really well into the workspace, because you're working with clients and your staff, because then you can, it helps give you that adaptability to seeing the world from different perspectives. Absolutely. Okay, well, we're getting to the rapid fire questioning. What is like a favorite book or podcast or source? And you're like, oh my gosh, I have to share it.
Yes. Okay. So I think less on the podcast side and more on the book side. Right now, I am rereading all of the Jane Austen novels. So I did Pride and Prejudice, and then I'm currently reading Emma again, but I'm doing it on Audible. So it's kind of like book/podcast, because the way that they are delivering it is kind of like a performance. It almost sounds like a movie. So they have all of the different, like you can hear a horse in the background and a carriage going over rocks and a clock ticking in the background. And then it's usually performed by like a theater group. So they're very animated. And so at first I was like, oh, that sounds so weird. I don't like it. But then I actually was like, oh, I love it. So yeah, I just, I'm back into the Jane Austen novels right now.
It's sort of funny because it's almost like a movie, but without the visual, right?
Exactly. Which is kind of nice, because you're sitting in front of a screen all day and you just want to have the experience of being, taken to a new place, but you don't want to have to look at a screen anymore. So I think
that's what I was telling somebody, that when I listen to biographies on Audible, I feel like I'm just listening to a movie, honestly.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. That's so cool. I love Audible for sure. Not sponsored. Just kidding.
It should be.
It should be. Yeah, it should be. Coming soon.
What would you consider a habit that you have that's contributed to your success?
Yeah, I really like this question, because when I was thinking about it, or, just as I think about it, I think that it's going to sound weird, but I think one of the habits that I do that contributes to my success is that I really preserve my energy. I try to protect my happiness and joy. I feel like there's so many random times that I've been complimented on like my personality, which is such a weird thing to, it sounds like a weird thing to get complimented on, but oh, I just love your personality. And so preserving the things that make me happy, the things that allow me to project joy and optimism into the world. So getting a good night's sleep every night, drinking water, like going for walks and spending time outside, like spending time with my family, not working 24/7. I feel like all of these different pieces and habits build up to me being a person that I feel like I can present to the world and have respond back to me with joy and optimism as well.
I love that. That's really needed, and just the importance of value of protecting that. I think that's a good reminder for a lot of us.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Especially lawyers who were very prone to overworking ourselves. I have friends who bill 12 to 16 hours a day. And I'm just like, I couldn't do that. It would really drain me. So that's why we need all these different tools to help us become more efficient.
yeah, no, definitely. From someone who's been working like almost every day for a month, I'm like taking note.
I'm surprised that I'm surprised that you maintain the energy that you have. It's commendable. But have a rest.
Thanks. What would you consider your superpower?
I think my superpower is the ability to analyze different systems and see how they might work together and all of the different logic pieces that come together within a Gavel workflow. That's why I got really good at it and was asked to teach other people how to use the tool, because I was able to kind of find ways to create a harmonized ecosystem between disparate tools. So I can look at tools and I can say, this is the streamlined way that you can have these work together, or these are 5 ones that you could get rid of and just focus your energy and your money on investing in these 3 tools. And then if you put them together like this and you have them flow like this together, then you'll have a streamlined intake and process of generating documents, for example. So just seeing how disparate tools can work together or what can be eliminated for a more streamlined approach, I think is my little superpower.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So, and then the last question is, what's your favorite board game?
My favorite board game is actually a card game. I'm going to cheat. So
that's allowed.
It's an alternate version of Uno called Spicy Uno. I don't know if you've ever played this. Yeah. So it's where you have different rules. So instead of just normal Uno where it's kind of boring, you can, everyone has to slap whenever a 6 gets put down. And then whoever's the last person has to draw 2 cards. And then you can steal someone's hand if you play a 0. You can play out of turn if you have the same exact card as the card that's in the middle. You can ask for help and somebody could give you a card that doesn't actually work. So there's lots of different fun twists on this particular game that would normally be fun, but also kind of not that interesting. But you add all these different rules on top of it and it makes for a really good time.
So you just can play with the regular deck of Uno.
You play with a regular deck. You just add the different rules.
Okay, because while you were talking about that, I was like searching this up. But we played Uno No Mercy recently, and it sounds a little funky like that.
Where
you pass your deck one direction to the person next to you, or I think it was like you take these cards, or I don't know. It was really, it was hard. I was playing with my kids and their friends. Like I think it was like Labor Day last year, and that's when one of the kids was telling me, one of the 8th graders was like, "There's all these different types of Uno." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like I've been playing Uno since I was a wee little, because that was the only way I could hang out with my cousins in Mexico. We didn't have to really speak the same language, and so now there's all these different types of Uno, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, now I have to."
Yes. So you need to try this one now. That's your new task.
Yeah. What people don't know is the reason I asked this question is because I'm looking for.
You're looking for it. I get it.
I'm also
what's one that you've taken and you've actually used it and like it was a huge hit in your family?
Well, I mean, I've learned through a family friend about the Monopoly, Monopoly deal. Oh, what was the huge hit? Like, I don't know. Like, I think sometimes what happens is people tell me one and I'm like, ooh, that sounds exciting. And then like, I like, consider, if I hear about it a couple times, then I'll decide to buy it. One person mentioned, I think it was like a business one to teach your kids about business. I think it was called like
Cash Flow.
Yeah.
My brother plays that with his, his two sons. One's going to be 15 and one's just turned 13. And they love the game so much. And it's really teaching them about, business and budgeting and expenses and whatever else. I actually haven't played it myself.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna have to get it then because I've played that at least a couple of times. And
especially since you have kids, I think it's a great way to introduce them.
Yeah, they're about that age. So yeah. Actually, we need to make a list of all the we need to of all the favorite games.
Yes.
Well, anyway, not too much on my game tangent there.
No, for sure.
So thank you so much for being on. And like, how can people stay in touch with you and find you and reach out to continue the conversation?
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So if you want to learn more about Gavel specifically, you can go to gavel.io. And if you want to start a free trial, I can give you an exclusive code to get 50% off your first month. Just use the code POD-50, POD-50 in order to get 50% off your first month. If you want to reach out to me directly, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. My name is Brittany Hernandez, or you can reach out to me via email at brittany@gavel.io, BRITTANY@gavel.io.
Well, thanks very much for that, Brittany. It's been a pleasure to have you, and definitely everyone check that out. And I think we learned a lot of good nuggets for how to automate and just leverage that technology, and even talked about access to justice. So it's been a good day. So thanks, everyone. And if you can stay in touch with us on Power Up Your Practice Facebook group, and we've got episodes coming out every week, and it's been great, and we'll see you next time.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you for tuning in to the Power Up Your Practice Law Practice Management podcast. I'm your host, Ruby Powers, and it's been a pleasure sharing this time with you. If you've enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to leave us a review, tell someone else about us, and we'd love to get this podcast shared with others to reach more listeners like you. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter for exclusive content, tips, and updates straight to your inbox. And exciting news, our book, The Power Up Your Practice, is out and available on Amazon. It's packed with strategies, 25 chapters, to help you elevate your practice and achieve your goals. So join us next week as we dive into more advice and insight on law practice management. We'll see you next time.